My wife emailed, "Don't call or come over. We're done." I replied, "Got it. Consider it's your last wish." My phone was blowing up. I shut her up forever. Let me tell you about the exact moment my life decided to cosplay as a dumpster fire in the middle of a perfectly mediocre Tuesday. I was sitting in my home office. Well, office is generous. It's really just the corner of my bedroom where I shoved a desk and pretended I had my act together, trying to look engaged in a Zoom meeting about quarterly projections that nobody cared about. You know the drill. Camera on, nodding at appropriate intervals, mentally composing your grocery list while someone named Brad from accounting explains pivot tables like he's describing the meaning of life. I had my thoughtful professional face locked and loaded, the one that says, "I'm definitely not wearing sweatpants below the waist, and I absolutely didn't eat cereal for lunch." That's when my phone lit up like a Christmas tree on steroids. The notification sound, that innocent little ping that usually means someone's liking your Instagram story or your mom's forwarding another chain message about hydration. This time hit different. Subject line, "Don't call or come over. We're done." Sender, Serena, my wife. Well, apparently soon-to-be ex-wife, based on the extremely subtle subject line that had all the delicacy of a sledgehammer to the kneecaps. 3 lines. She broke up with me in 3 lines via email. Not even a phone call. Not a "we need to talk" text that gives you 30 seconds to prepare your emotional support system. Just a corporate-style termination notice, like I was a Netflix subscription she forgot to cancel. The body of the email was even better, and by better, I mean worse. Just a cold, clinical paragraph about needing space and growing apart, and other greatest hits from the breakup cliché playlist. No explanation. No real reason. Just a digital door slam that echoed through my inbox like the saddest notification I'd ever received. Now, here's where I probably should have taken a breath, maybe closed my laptop, definitely should have muted myself on the Zoom. Instead, I did what any rational human being would do when their marriage implodes via electronic correspondence. I replied immediately. "Got it. Consider it's your last wish." I hit send before my brain could catch up with my fingers, which is pretty much how I've made every questionable decision in my life. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it petty? You bet your ass. Did it feel weirdly satisfying in that moment? Like you wouldn't believe. What I didn't anticipate, because apparently I'm an optimist and an idiot, was that this one sentence would detonate my life like I'd accidentally triggered a social media nuclear warhead. Within minutes, my phone started vibrating so aggressively I thought it was having a seizure. Texts, calls, voicemails, DMs, carrier pigeons. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it wouldn't have surprised me. It was like I'd accidentally announced my candidacy for president or confessed to a crime on live television. Jamal, my best friend since college and professional chaos enabler, was the first to call. I could hear him cackling before I even answered. "Bro," he wheezed, and I could practically see him doubled over. "Bro. This is content. This is generational content. You just became a meme and you don't even know it yet." Turns out, Serena had posted something cryptic on social media, because of course she had. Nothing says mature breakup, like vague posting to 300 people, and someone had screenshot my response, and now our personal business was getting passed around the internet like a joint at a college party. My mother called exactly 4 minutes later, and I learned more about emotional devastation, family disappointment, and our genealogical tree in 12 minutes than I had in 32 years of existence. "Your grandmother's cousin went through something similar in 1987. She informed me, voice trembling with that specific frequency that mothers use when they're not sure if they should hug you or hit you with a wooden spoon. She proceeded to detail every failed relationship in our family history, apparently trying to make me feel better by proving that romantic destruction was genetic. Thanks, Mom. Really helpful. Nothing says you'll get through this, like finding out great Uncle Harold also got dumped and died alone with 17 cats. The texts kept rolling in. Serena's sister Mia, who I'd always suspected enjoyed drama more than oxygen, sent a paragraph that was 70% crying emojis and 30% accusations that I was somehow the villain in this story. Her friend Britta, who I'd met exactly twice and who definitely didn't like me, texted, "Are you okay? I'm coming over with wine, and we can talk about what you did wrong." The passive aggression was so thick I could have cut it with a knife and served it at Thanksgiving. My neighbor, Mrs. Ortega, a 70-something Puerto Rican woman who knew everyone's business before they did and made killer lemon bars, knocked on my door within the hour. She was holding a plate covered in aluminum foil and wearing an expression that combined pity, curiosity, and the unmistakable look of someone who'd been waiting for gossip this juicy since the Johnsons' divorce last spring. "Mijo," she said, pressing the warm plate into my hands. "He wasn't faithful, right?" I always knew something was off. I corrected. "And actually, no. Well, I don't think." I stammered, suddenly realizing I had no idea what the truth was anymore. Hum," Mrs. Ortega hummed, which is universal for, "I'm going to believe whatever makes the best story." She patted my arm and shuffled back to her apartment, probably already drafting the group text to the building's unofficial neighborhood watch that was really just a gossip network with better intentions. I stood there in my doorway, holding lemon bars and the shattered remains of my dignity, and did what any self-respecting adult would do. I went inside, sat at my kitchen table in my ratty college sweatshirt that said Property of Athletics Department, even though I'd never played a sport in my life, and stared at my phone like it might suddenly offer me answers. Or an instruction manual. Or a time machine. The thing is, getting dumped by email shouldn't have felt like an achievement, but somehow my response, that stupid, dramatic, probably shouldn't have sent it reply, made me feel weirdly proud. Like I'd at least maintained some dignity in the face of digital assassination. That sentence became my weird badge of honor, my bruise, and my banner all at once. It was the dumbest hill to die on, but at least it was mine. I sat there trying to figure out whether I should laugh, cry, order takeout, call a florist and send Serena the world's most passive-aggressive bouquet, or just set my phone on fire and join a monastery where nobody had Wi-Fi or opinions about my personal life. The fluorescent light above my kitchen table buzzed like it was judging me. The coffee maker gurgled sympathetically. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing music too loud, and it sounded like the universe's soundtrack to my humiliation. And that's how my Tuesday, perfectly average, beautifully boring Tuesday, became the day I got dumped via email and accidentally became the main character in a story I never auditioned for. Spoiler alert, it only gets weirder from here. If I thought the initial explosion of notifications was bad, I was adorably naive, like a puppy who doesn't know the vacuum cleaner is about to ruin his entire afternoon. The digital avalanche didn't stop. It multiplied like some kind of terrible social media virus that fed on human misery and the inability of people to mind their own damn business. My phone became a slot machine that wouldn't stop paying out, except instead of quarters, it was dispensing judgment, unsolicited advice, and screenshots of conversations I wasn't part of but was definitely the subject of. I started cataloging the interruptions like some kind of weird museum curator of my own personal disaster. Here we have a text from my college roommate who I haven't spoken to in 6 years, asking if I'm holding up okay at 2 in the morning. And over here, a voicemail from my dentist receptionist who somehow heard about this and wants me to know that Mercury is in retrograde, which apparently explains everything. The absurdity was so thick you could spread it on toast. Serena's group chat, which I'd been removed from faster than you can say block contact, had apparently gone absolutely feral. I know this because people kept forwarding me screenshots like they were doing me a favor, like I needed to see in real time how my marriage was being dissected by people who thought brunch was a personality trait. The messages ranged from supportive, he seemed nice, but was probably emotionally unavailable, to absolutely unhinged. I always knew he had dead eyes. Remember that Christmas party? For the record, I don't have dead eyes. I have tired eyes. There's a difference, and it's called working a full-time job while apparently being married to someone plotting my social execution. Mia, Serena's sister, called me crying, and I used the term crying loosely because it sounded more like a theatrical performance than genuine emotion. She had that specific quality of sadness that comes with an audience in mind, like she was auditioning for a reality show about family drama. "I can't believe this is happening," she sobbed, which was rich considering she'd probably been in on whatever this was from the beginning. "You two seemed so perfect." "Yeah, well, so did the Titanic before it met that iceberg, Mia. Things change." Her friend Britta, who I'd literally met twice, once at a birthday party where she'd spent the entire time talking about her juice cleanse, and once at a wedding where she'd cornered me to explain cryptocurrency. texted me with the energy of someone who'd been waiting their entire life for this moment. Are you okay? I'm coming over with wine, and we need to talk about what happened. I always sensed something was off with your communication style. My communication style? Lady, you once spent 45 minutes telling me about your spiritual journey through a Whole Foods, and I listened politely. That's elite-level communication. Jamal, my actual best friend, and the only person whose opinion I valued, was having the time of his life. He sent me a continuous stream of GIFs, crying laughing emojis, scenes from soap operas, that one Michael Jackson eating popcorn meme. Around 3 p.m., he texted, "Dude, you're trending in our friend group. Jenny just asked if you're taking applications for a new wife. I told her you're in your villain era, and it's too soon." I couldn't even be mad. At least someone was enjoying this catastrophe. Work became its own special circle of hell. I dragged myself into the office Wednesday morning because apparently my personal life imploding wasn't a valid excuse to work from home, and immediately became the office mystery man. People looked at me with this mix of pity and fascination, like I was a tragic character in a limited series they were all binge-watching. My assistant Priya, a 26-year-old who had more emotional intelligence than everyone else in the building combined, slid a coffee onto my desk without a word. Then she looked at me with those knowing eyes and said, "You look dramatic. Like protagonist of an indie film dramatic. Should I cancel your meetings, or are we powering through?" "Powering through," I said, because the alternative was going home and staring at my phone while it continued its impression of a fireworks display. "Respect," Priya nodded. "Also, everyone knows. Like, everyone. Karen from HR sent out a mental health resource, email, and CC'd the entire floor. Pretty sure it was about you." Fantastic. Nothing says professional work environment like your marital collapse becoming an office-wide teaching moment. My boss, Richard, a man whose entire personality could be summarized as LinkedIn post energy, postponed my afternoon meeting. He did that thing where he tried to be casual about it, sending an email that said, "Hey, let's reschedule. No rush on those reports," which in Richard speak meant, "I'm terrified of your emotional state and don't want you crying in the conference room." It was either genuine pity or sheer terror that he might catch whatever curse had infected my life, like divorce was contagious and could spread through shared elevator rides. I decided that if life was going to serve me drama on a silver platter, I might as well dress for the occasion. I wore my best shirt, the one I usually save for client presentations, and actually combed my hair. If I was going to be the office's entertainment, I'd at least look like I had my shit together, even if my shit was currently scattered across the floor like a jigsaw puzzle made entirely of red flags I'd ignored. Humor became my shield, my armor, my only defense against the relentless onslaught of concern and curiosity. When Karen from HR did eventually corner me in the break room with that concerned face that HR people perfect in training, asking if I needed any support or resources, I smiled and said, "Yes, actually. I need tissues, a small orchestra to follow me around playing sad violin music, and maybe a certificate that says survived email breakup that I can frame." She laughed nervously and handed me a pamphlet about the Employee Assistance Program. Close enough. But underneath the jokes and the sarcasm and the carefully maintained facade of someone who was totally fine and definitely not spiraling, there was this truth that kept bubbling up like acid reflux after bad takeout. Serena hadn't just cut me off. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in the heat of an argument. The more I thought about it, and trust me, I had nothing but time to think about it, the more I realized she'd been planning this. You don't break up with someone via email with that level of clinical precision unless you've rehearsed it. Unless you've been thinking about it for a while. Maybe weeks. Maybe months. That realization hit different. It wasn't just the breakup. It was the premeditation. It was knowing that while I'd been going through life thinking everything was fine, maybe a little boring but fine, she'd been mentally packing her bags and writing her exit speech. I'd been living in a sitcom while she was plotting a heist. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Another call. Another person who suddenly remembered I existed now that I was the main character in the tragedy of the week. I silenced it and shoved it in my desk drawer, watching the wood muffle the vibrations. Priya appeared at my desk with another coffee. "You know what's wild?" I said, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. I thought I knew her. Like, really knew her. And now I'm finding out I maybe didn't know anything at all. Priya nodded, perching on the edge of my desk. People are good at hiding things when they want to, especially when they've decided you're not worth the truth. That stung, mostly because it was accurate. The truth was simmering somewhere beneath all this noise, and I was starting to realize that if I wanted answers, I was going to have to go looking for them myself. Because Serena clearly wasn't planning on providing any, and everyone else was too busy having opinions to actually help. My phone buzzed again in the drawer, muffled but persistent. I left it there. For now, I had work to do, a reputation to maintain, and approximately 47 unread messages to ignore. The breakdown could wait until after 5 p.m. That's what calendars are for. Curiosity is a terrible roommate. It doesn't pay rent, it eats all your snacks, and it keeps you up at night whispering increasingly unhinged theories about your life. Thursday evening, I found myself sitting on my couch with a beer I wasn't really drinking, staring at my phone like it might suddenly reveal the secrets of the universe, or at least explain what the hell had happened to my marriage. That's when I made the fateful decision to do something I absolutely should not have done, but was completely going to do anyway. I started looking for clues. Serena's Instagram was my first stop on this terrible journey, and holy hell, it was a masterpiece of theatrical performance art. Her feed had exploded with single and thriving photos that looked like they'd been curated by someone who'd taken a masterclass in passive-aggressive social media warfare. There she was at a coffee shop, laughing at something off-camera with a caption about new beginnings and finding myself. There she was at sunset, filtered within an inch of its life, with a quote about butterflies and transformations that was definitely stolen from some wellness influencer. Each photo was more aggressively joyful than the last, like she was trying to convince herself as much as everyone else that dumping me via email was actually a spiritual awakening. The comments section was even better, and by better, I mean it made me want to throw my phone into the ocean. Her friends were falling all over themselves with support. You're glowing queen, and he never deserved you. And my personal favorite, this is your time. Like I'd been holding her hostage in some tower instead of, being married to her and thinking things were relatively fine. One person, I didn't even recognize the name, commented, finally free from toxic energy. And I wanted to reply, the only toxic energy here is your understanding of relationships, Jennifer. But I had just enough self-control left to resist. But Instagram was just the appetizer. The real meal came when I started going through our apartment like some kind of divorce detective, except instead of solving crimes, I was solving the mystery of how I'd become this clueless. I found receipts in the trash, because apparently Serena wasn't great at covering her tracks. She was just banking on me being too oblivious to look. Dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never been to, dated on nights when she'd told me she was working late or out with the girls. One receipt in particular caught my eye. A place called Chez Louis, extremely fancy, the kind of restaurant where they serve you 3 molecules of food on a plate the size of your head and charge you $200 for the privilege. The date on the receipt? Our anniversary. The same night, she texted me saying she had a migraine and couldn't make our reservation. I'd spent that evening eating Thai takeout alone, watching basketball, feeling vaguely disappointed but understanding because, hey, migraines are real and I'm not a monster. Meanwhile, she'd apparently been at Chez Louis with someone who ordered the filet mignon and a bottle of wine that cost more than my car payment. The name on the reservation, printed helpfully at the bottom of the receipt, Henri, a very French-sounding name for a guy who, based on additional Googling that I'm not proud of but absolutely committed to, couldn't parallel park to save his life. I found a video on Serena's friend's Instagram story from a few weeks ago, tagged at some bar, and there in the background was Serena laughing with a guy who looked like he shopped exclusively at stores that sold business casual as a lifestyle choice. Khakis. The man wore khakis like he was auditioning for a Gap commercial. This was Henri, presumably. My replacement. A man who couldn't navigate a parking spot and thought khakis were a personality. I did what any rational person would do when they discover their wife has been living a double life. I became an amateur forensic accountant. I pulled up our joint credit card statements. Yes, we still had joint finances because apparently I was the only one who hadn't gotten the memo that we were getting divorced and started highlighting charges that didn't make sense. There were a lot of them. Like, a concerning number of them. A hotel charge from 3 months ago, some boutique place downtown, Checked in on a Friday night when Serena had told me she was at a work retreat in Philadelphia. $240 for one night. Our credit card paid for the room where my wife was presumably cheating on me. The irony was so thick you could bottle it and sell it as artisanal irony at Whole Foods. There was a charge from Tiffany's, $1,500, dated 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. I never got anything from Tiffany's for Valentine's Day. I got a card. A nice card, sure, with a heartfelt message about partnership and growth, but definitely not $1,500 worth of jewelry. So where did that bracelet go? Not to me. That's for damn sure. I made a list. I'm a list guy. It's how I cope with chaos. I opened a Notes app document and started cataloging every suspicious charge, every receipt, every little inconsistency that I'd been too trusting or too stupid or too busy to notice before. The hotel charges, the restaurants, the unexplained shopping sprees. A men's suit from Nordstrom, $600, that I definitely didn't buy because I've owned the same 3 suits since college and they all smell faintly of desperation and job interviews. For S, happy anniversary, the gift note said, according to the email receipt I found buried in our shared email account. Serena bought someone a $600 suit for our anniversary. The same anniversary where she'd given me a book about mindfulness and told me we should focus on emotional growth. I was focusing on emotional growth while she was apparently funding someone else's entire wardrobe. I texted Jamal a screenshot of the suit receipt. If Infidelity had a subscription plan, I'd cancel it. He replied immediately, "Bro, you're paying for premium features you didn't even know existed. This is next level." The jokes helped. They kept me from completely losing my mind, from spiraling into that dark place where you start questioning every single moment of your relationship, wondering which smiles were real and which were just good acting. But underneath the humor, I felt something new growing. This heat behind my eyes that wasn't quite tears and wasn't quite anger. It was something sharper, something that felt like the beginning of a plan. I sat at my kitchen table until 2 a.m., laptop open, papers spread around me like I was preparing for the world's saddest thesis defense. I had receipts. I had timestamps. I had credit card statements that read like a tragic novel titled, "How I Funded My Own Betrayal," a financial breakdown. Every charge, every inconsistency, every little breadcrumb Serena had carelessly left behind because she'd assumed I was too trusting or too dumb to connect the dots. But here's the thing about breadcrumbs. Eventually, they lead somewhere. And I was starting to realize that where they led was towards something bigger than just a cheating spouse. This wasn't just about Henri and his terrible parking skills and his khakis. This was about money. My money. Our money. Money that was disappearing into places I couldn't track for purposes I hadn't agreed to, funding a life I wasn't part of. I felt stupid. God, I felt so incredibly stupid. How long had this been going on? How many dinners? How many hotels? How many gifts purchased with our joint account while I was at home thinking we were saving for a future that apparently only I believed in? The embarrassment was almost worse than the betrayal. Almost. I closed my laptop and looked around my apartment. Our apartment, technically, though it had never felt less like ours than it did right now. The furniture we'd picked out together. The pictures on the wall from vacations that now felt like elaborate lies. The coffee maker I'd bought her for Christmas because she'd mentioned wanting one, casually, and I'd remembered because that's what you do when you love someone. You remember the small things. Except she'd been remembering things too. She'd been remembering to delete emails and hide receipts and maintain 2 separate lives with the precision of someone who'd done this before or at least thought about it enough to get good at it. My phone buzzed. Another message from someone offering condolences or gossip or unsolicited advice. I ignored it. I had work to do. Real work. The kind of work that required spreadsheets and documentation and a level of pettiness that I was just now discovering I was capable of. Curiosity might be a terrible roommate, but turns out it's an excellent motivator. And I was just getting started. Friday afternoon, I was sitting in my office pretending to care about a PowerPoint presentation when Priya knocked on my door with an expression that could only be described as, "You're going to want to sit down for this." Since I was already sitting, I just stared at her until she walked in and closed the door behind her with the kind of deliberate slowness that means someone's about to ruin your day. "So," she said, pulling out her phone, "you need to see something, and I'm sorry in advance because it's bad." Like, really bad. Like, I debated showing you this for 20 minutes bad. She turned her phone toward me, and there it was, Serena's Instagram live stream from last night. A live stream I hadn't been invited to, hadn't known about, and definitely wasn't prepared for. The video had that filtered, ring-lit glow that makes everyone look like they're starring in their own reality show. And Serena was front and center, surrounded by her inner circle of enablers. Friends. All holding wine glasses and looking like they were at some kind of spiritual awakening retreat instead of what was clearly a, "we're celebrating my divorce party." The caption read, "Finally free from toxicity. Healing night with my real ones." Two hearts, sparkles, butterfly, the butterfly emoji. She used a butterfly emoji. Like she was emerging from a cocoon instead of, blowing up a marriage via email and apparently spending my money to celebrate it. I watched the video with the kind of morbid fascination you have when you see a car accident. You know you shouldn't look, but you literally cannot stop yourself. Serena was giving a toast, her voice thick with that performative emotion that reality TV stars use when they want you to think they're being authentic. "To freedom," she said, raising her glass while her friends hooped and hollered like she'd just announced she'd cured cancer. "To finally choosing myself. To walking away from situations that no longer serve me." Situations. I was a situation now. Not a person, not a husband, not someone she'd made vows to. A situation that no longer served her, like a gym membership she'd forgotten to cancel. "And thank you all for being here," she continued, dabbing at her eyes even though I couldn't see any actual tears, "for supporting me through this journey. I couldn't have done this without you." The comments were rolling in real time at the bottom of the screen. "You're so brave. Queen behavior. He never appreciated you." I wanted to reach through the phone and ask these people, these strangers who knew literally nothing about our relationship, what exactly made them experts on who appreciated whom. But that would require me to care about their opinions, and I was rapidly running out of caring to give. Then came the part that made my blood pressure spike so hard I could hear it in my ears. One of her friends, I think her name was Chelsea or Madison, or some other name that came with a trust fund and opinions about brunch spots, said, "And can we talk about how you planned this whole evening yourself? The decorations, the wine selection, everything. This is your night." Serena laughed, that high-pitched laugh she did when she was nervous or lying or both, and said, "Well, when you've been planning your freedom for months, you want to celebrate it, right?" Months. She said months. On camera. To an audience of however many people were watching this digital celebration of my humiliation. I realized, with the kind of clarity that feels like getting slapped awake, that I was looking at people in actual formal wear. This wasn't just some casual girls' night with wine from Trader Joe's. These people were wearing cocktail dresses and heels. There were professionally arranged flowers in the background. This was a produced event. This was planned. And the wine. I could see the bottles on the table behind them. Labels facing the camera like this was a sponsored post. That was expensive wine. Like, really expensive. The kind of wine that comes in bottles that look like art installations and costs more per glass than most people spend on groceries. Wine that I recognized because I'd bought it for our wedding. Wine that had been in our shared storage unit, that I'd been saving for a special occasion. She was drinking our wedding wine to celebrate leaving me. "This is insane," I said, but it came out quieter than I meant it to, like my voice couldn't quite match the volume of my rage. Priya nodded. "It gets worse. Keep watching. How could it possibly get worse?" "Oh, sweet summer me." I had no idea. The camera panned around the room. Someone was filming on a professional setup, not just a phone, which meant this was really planned, and I saw it. The venue. I recognized that wallpaper, those windows, that specific ugly chandelier that looked like someone had bedazzled an octopus. It was the community center. Our community center. The same place where we'd hosted neighborhood potlucks and holiday parties, and that one disastrous karaoke night where Mrs. Ortega had sung, "I Will Survive" for 7 minutes straight. Serena had rented out our community center, the place where we'd made actual good memories with actual people who liked both of us, to throw herself a freedom party. And the rental fees? Those came out of the community fund that everyone in the building contributed to. The fund that I'd contributed to. I'd literally helped pay for the venue where my wife was celebrating dumping me. I felt my jaw actually drop, like a cartoon character. "You're kidding." "I wish I was kidding," Priya said. "There's more. Look at the decorations." I looked. Behind Serena and her Greek chorus of support, there were banners. Actual printed banners that said things like "New Beginnings" and "Choose Yourself" in that cursive font that every basic Instagram post uses. There were balloons. There was a cake. I could see it on the side table, professionally decorated with what looked like a butterfly design, because of course it was. This wasn't a spontaneous celebration. This wasn't even a regular party. This was a whole production, complete with props and staging and probably a set list. This was premeditated celebration. She'd been planning this before she'd even sent me that email. Maybe weeks before. Maybe while we were still eating dinner together and watching Netflix and existing in what I'd thought was a normal, slightly boring, but fundamentally okay marriage. I'd been living in a completely different reality. While I was thinking about what to make for dinner and whether we needed to buy more paper towels, Serena had been choreographing her exit like it was a Broadway show, and I was the only one who hadn't gotten a ticket. The audacity, I said, and then I laughed because what else was I supposed to do? Cry? I'd done enough of that in the shower this week where nobody could hear me. The absolute audacity of this woman to rent our community space, drink our wedding wine, and throw a party celebrating how terrible I apparently was, all while probably charging it to our joint credit card. Priya winced. About that. I may have checked because I'm nosy and also worried about you. The rental fee for the community center? Charged to your joint account 3 weeks ago. The catering, because yes, there was catering, also your joint account. The cake, the flowers, even the photographer who's filming this whole thing, all your joint account. I paid for my own public humiliation. I literally funded the party celebrating the end of my marriage. If there was a world record for being pathetically, cosmically cuckolded by financial circumstances, I just won it. They should give me a trophy. They should give me several trophies and maybe a certificate and definitely therapy. How much? I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Total? About $3,000. $3,000. I'd unknowingly spent $3,000 so my ex-wife could throw herself a party to celebrate leaving me, in a venue we both used, drinking wine we'd been saving, surrounded by people who were now convinced I was the villain in this story. I looked at Priya, who was watching me with the careful expression of someone trying to determine if I was about to have a breakdown or start laughing maniacally. Honestly, it could have gone either way. I need to make some calls, I said. To who? I don't know yet. But I'm done being the punchline in my own life story. That video, that stupid, overproduced, narcissistic celebration of my failure, became my turning point. Not because it hurt, though it did. Not because it was humiliating, though it absolutely was. But because it made me realize something important. Serena thought this was over. She thought she'd won. She thought she could throw a party, toast to freedom, broadcast her victory to the internet, and that would be the end of it. She forgot one crucial detail. I was still here. I was still watching. And I was getting really, really tired of being treated like background music in my own life. The nice guy routine had gotten me exactly nowhere except broke and embarrassed. Time to change the playlist. Saturday morning, I woke up with a hangover despite not drinking, which is just what happens when your brain spends 8 hours processing betrayal instead of actual rest. I made coffee. The good stuff, because if my life was falling apart, at least my caffeine game would be strong, and decided to do something monumentally stupid. I was going to deep dive into our shared email account. The one we'd set up years ago for household stuff, like utility bills and furniture deliveries. The one I hadn't checked in months, because who has time to read emails about water bills and appointment confirmations? Turns out, Serena had time. Serena had lots of time, apparently, because our shared inbox was a treasure trove of information I absolutely was not supposed to see. I scrolled past the usual garbage, newsletters from stores I'd never shopped at, promotional emails about sales on things nobody needs, 17 unread messages from our internet provider threatening to upgrade us to a package we didn't want. Then I saw it. An email chain with the subject line Settlement Agreement, Confidential. The sender was someone named David Kruger, Esquire, which is lawyer speak for, "This is going to cost you money." My hand hovered over the mouse. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew that whatever was in that email was going to make everything worse. But I'm not great at making good decisions, especially when curiosity is screaming at me like a toddler who wants candy, so I clicked. The email chain was from 2 months ago. 2 months. Before the breakup email. Before the party. before any of this had supposedly just happened because we'd grown apart. The first message was from David Kruger, attorney at law and homewrecker facilitator, confirming receipt of documents regarding asset division and settlement terms. He was writing to Serena, very formally, very professionally, laying out a timeline for what he called the dissolution process. I scrolled down. There was talk about transfer of assets and equitable distribution and a bunch of other legal jargon that basically translated to, "We're going to take your stuff and make it sound official." But the phrase that made my stomach drop, the phrase that I kept reading over and over because surely I was misunderstanding it, was this: pending transfer of primary account funds and execution of power of attorney documentation. Power of attorney. She was trying to get power of attorney. Over my accounts. Over our shared assets. Over everything we'd built together, which admittedly wasn't a fortune but was enough that losing it would hurt. A lot. I felt my hands start shaking, which was annoying because I needed them to scroll, and they were too busy having a physiological response to betrayal. There was another email, this one from Serena to David, asking about expediting the signature process and whether my signature could be handled without direct involvement. Handled. Like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed, a checkbox on her legal to-do list. She was planning to forge my signature, or trick me into signing something, or find some legal loophole that would let her take my money without me knowing what I was agreeing to. The casual way she discussed it, like she was asking about catering options instead of financial fraud, made me want to throw my laptop across the room. I didn't, because I needed it, and also because property destruction wasn't going to solve anything, but the urge was there. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I went through the entire email chain, methodically capturing every message, every attachment, every piece of evidence that proved this wasn't just a marriage falling apart. This was premeditated. This was planned. This was a heist. And I was the mark who'd been too stupid or too trusting to see it coming. My phone was sitting next to me, and I stared at it for a solid minute before deciding to call the one person I knew who could help, Lila. Lila Chun, my friend from college who'd gone to law school and was now a very scary, very competent attorney who specialized in family law and had a reputation for eating opposing counsel for breakfast. We'd stayed friends after graduation because Lila was funny and smart and didn't take crap from anyone, including me. She answered on the second ring. "This better be good. I'm at brunch, and they just brought out bottomless mimosas. Serena's trying to steal my money using power of attorney fraud," I said, because why waste time with pleasantries? There was a pause. I heard the sound of a chair scraping, footsteps, a door closing. When Lila spoke again, her voice had shifted from friend having brunch to lawyer who's about to ruin someone's day. "Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Don't leave out a single detail because you think it's not important. I'll decide what's important." I told her. The email, the party, the receipts, the hotel charges, the suit from Nordstrom, the wedding wine. All of it came pouring out in a stream of consciousness confession that probably made me sound unhinged, but Lila just listened, occasionally making those little hum sounds that lawyers make when they're mentally building a case. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who's seen this before and knows exactly how it ends. "Okay," she said. "First of all, she's an idiot. Like, a genuinely stupid person who thinks she's smart. Second, you need to do exactly what I tell you, and you need to do it today. Not tomorrow, not Monday, today. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, because what else was I going to say? "No, I'd rather let my wife steal my life savings." "Good. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to collect every receipt, every screenshot, every piece of evidence you have. Bank statements, credit card bills, emails, text messages, Instagram posts, everything. Make copies, multiple copies. Put them in different places. Email them to yourself, save them to a cloud drive, burn them onto a USB if you have to. I want a paper trail so thick we could build a house with it." I was already pulling up files, organizing folders, my fingers moving faster than my brain. "Okay, what else? You're going to freeze your joint accounts. Call the bank. Tell them there's suspicious activity. Tell them you need to protect your assets. They'll walk you through it. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not tell Serena you're doing this. If she asks, if she tries to access the money and it's frozen, you play dumb. You know nothing. You're shocked. You're confused. You thought everything was fine. I can do shocked and confused, I said. I've been doing it all week. Good. And then you're going to send me everything you just collected, and I'm going to forward it to a friend of mine who works in fraud investigation. Because this isn't just divorce stuff anymore. This is attempted theft. This is forgery. This is the kind of thing that could get her in actual legal trouble beyond just losing the settlement. The word settlement made me laugh, bitter and sharp. What settlement? She was just going to take everything. Yeah, well, she's not anymore. Trust me, I spent the next 4 hours becoming the world's most dedicated archivist of my own disaster. I organized files by date, by type, by level of incriminating evidence. I created folders within folders. I made backups of backups. Jamal came over around 3 p.m. with pizza and moral support, took one look at my laptop setup, and said, "Bro, you look like a conspiracy theorist, but like a really organized one." "I'm documenting a conspiracy," I said, showing him the power of attorney email. "Does that count?" He read it, his eyes getting wider with each line. Holy crap, she was going to rob you. Like, legally rob you, but still rob you. Yep. And you had no idea? Not even a little bit. Jamal sat down, grabbed a slice of pizza, and looked at me with something like respect. "You know what? I take back every time I said you were too nice. This," he gestured at my laptop, at the organized chaos of evidence, at my slightly unhinged but very determined expression. "This is growth. This is character development. You're becoming the protagonist." "I was always the protagonist," I said. "I just didn't know it was a revenge story." Priya texted me around 5 p.m. "How's the mental breakdown going?" I sent her a photo of my evidence folders. "Actually, I think I'm having a mental breakthrough instead. That's either really healthy or really concerning. Can't tell which." "Me neither. But at least I'm doing something." By the time the sun went down, I had everything organized, backed up, and sent to Lila. My mood had shifted from devastated to something sharper, something that felt like purpose. Serena thought she was smart. She thought she'd covered her tracks. She thought I'd just roll over and accept whatever story she wanted to tell. But she forgot that I was still here, still watching, and now, finally, I was done being the nice guy who got walked all over. The receipts were collected. The evidence was organized. The lawyer was briefed. And I was ready to stop being the victim in my own story. Monday afternoon, I was sitting at my kitchen table staring at spreadsheets that were starting to blur together. Bank statements, credit card charges, email timestamps. All the boring administrative work of proving your life has been a lie, when someone knocked on my door. Not the doorbell, which would have been normal, but an actual knock, tentative and quiet, like whoever was out there wasn't sure they should be there at all. I opened the door to find Rosa, the cleaning lady who worked in the building. I'd talked to her maybe a dozen times in the 3 years I'd lived here. Usually just polite hallway conversations about the weather or how the elevator was broken again. She was probably in her late 50s, always wore her hair in a neat bun, and had the kind of face that had seen too much of other people's business to be shocked by anything. She was holding a USB drive like it might explode. "Mr. Stevens," she said, her accent thick but her English perfect. "I found this. In the elevator. I think." She paused, glancing down the hallway like she was worried someone might overhear. "I think you need to see what's on it." I looked at the USB drive, then at Rosa, then back at the USB drive. This felt like the beginning of a thriller movie, the part where the protagonist gets handed mysterious evidence and immediately regrets every decision that follows. But I was already neck-deep in my own personal drama, so what was one more questionable choice? "What's on it?" I asked. "Security footage," she said quietly. "From the building cameras. I wasn't supposed to take it, but I cleaned the security office and I saw your wife, your ex-wife, on the screen, and I thought you should know. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to give her a raise except I wasn't her employer. I wanted to build her a statue in the lobby. Instead, I just took the USB drive very carefully, like it was made of glass and contained the secrets to the universe." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything in weeks. "Seriously, thank you." Rosa nodded, already backing away toward the elevator. "I don't want trouble. But what she did, what I saw, that's not right. You seem like a good man. You deserve to know." She disappeared into the elevator before I could respond, leaving me standing in my doorway holding a USB drive that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I plugged it into my laptop with the kind of anticipation you usually reserve for Christmas morning or lottery results. The drive contained video files, organized by date, each one labeled with timestamps. I clicked on the first one, dated 3 months ago, 11:47 p.m. The footage was grainy. Building security cameras aren't exactly Hollywood quality, but it was clear enough. There was Serena, leaving our apartment building, walking toward the lobby with a large rolling suitcase. And next to her, carrying another suitcase and what looked like a garment bag, was a man. Not just any man, Henri. I recognized him from the Instagram photos, from the background of Serena's thriving posts. Same khakis and polo energy, same haircut that looked like he'd asked for business casual, and the barber had taken it literally. They weren't touching, weren't holding hands, but there was an intimacy in how they moved together, how he held the door for her, how she laughed at something he said. The body language of people who knew each other well. Too well. I clicked on the next video. Same scenario, different date. 1:23 a.m. this time. Serena and Henri, leaving the building, him carrying bags, her looking around like she was worried someone might see them. Which, in retrospect, she should have been, because someone did see them. Multiple someones, apparently, if Rosa had noticed enough to steal security footage. The third video was dated the same night as one of the hotel charges I'd found on our credit card. There they were, leaving the building at 9:15 p.m., dressed nicely. Serena in a dress I recognized. Henri in what was probably that $600 suit she'd bought him with our money. They came back at 2:37 a.m. The timestamp on the hotel charge? Check-in at 9:45 p.m., check-out at 2 p.m. the next day. I sat back in my chair and laughed. Because what else are you supposed to do when you're handed video evidence of your wife's affair on a USB drive by your building's cleaning lady? This was beyond anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just email trails and suspicious receipts. This was visual, undeniable, timestamp-stamped proof. But here's where it got really interesting. The last video on the USB drive was dated just 2 weeks ago, after Serena had sent the breakup email, after we were supposedly done. The footage showed Henri entering our building, where Serena didn't even live anymore because she'd moved out to her healing space, or whatever, using a keycard to get in. He went up to our floor, stayed for 47 minutes based on the timestamps, then left, carrying a box from our apartment. A box of what? I had no idea, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that Serena had given Henri access to our place. Our place that was still technically jointly owned, still had my name on the lease, still contained my belongings and my life. She'd given her affair partner, the guy she'd been sneaking around with for months, a key to our home. I felt something shift in my chest, something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite hurt. It was colder than that, more calculating. It was the feeling of someone who'd just been handed the winning hand in a poker game and was deciding exactly how to play it. I made copies of everything. I backed up the USB drive to my computer, to a cloud service, to another USB drive that I immediately took to Jamal's apartment for safekeeping. I wasn't taking any chances. This footage was gold. This footage was evidence. This footage was the kind of thing that could turn a she said divorce into a here's literal video proof she's been lying legal slam dunk. I called Lila. It was 7 p.m., which meant she was probably still at her office because Lila treated work-life balance like a suggestion rather than a rule. She answered immediately. Please tell me you have good news because I just spent 6 hours reviewing the most boring contract in human history and I need something exciting. Rosa from my building just gave me security footage of Serena and her boyfriend leaving the building multiple times over the last 3 months, including timestamps that matched the hotel charges and restaurant receipts. Silence. Then, Rosa is invited to my wedding. I don't have a fiancé yet, but when I do, Rosa gets an invitation. Also, send me that footage immediately. Like, right now. I'm pulling up my email as we speak. I sent it while we were still on the phone, listening to Lila's increasingly delighted reactions as she watched the videos. Oh, this is beautiful, she said. This is absolutely beautiful. Do you know what this means? That my wife is bad at being sneaky. Well, yes, but also that we now have documented proof of infidelity with timestamps that correlate with financial impropriety. She was using your joint funds to facilitate an affair. That's not just cheating, that's financial misconduct. Any judge is going to look at this and crucify her. Good, I said, and I meant it. The nice guy version of me from 2 weeks ago would have felt guilty about that. Would have worried about being too harsh, too vindictive, too mean. But that guy was gone. That guy had been replaced by someone who was tired of being treated like a doormat. There's more, Lila continued. That last video, where he enters the apartment after you're separated, that's potentially criminal trespassing, or at minimum a violation of your lease agreement. We can use that. We can use all of this. I looked at my laptop screen, at the frozen image of Serena and Henri walking out of my building like they owned the place, like they hadn't just been systematically destroying my life for their own convenience. Use it, I said. Use all of it. I'm done playing nice. Finally, Lila said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I was wondering when you'd get there. Now, here's what we're going to do next. She laid out a plan that was part legal strategy and part psychological warfare, and with every word, I felt myself getting more focused, more determined. I'd spent weeks feeling like a victim, like someone things were happening to. But now I had evidence. Now I had proof. Now I had a cleaning lady who was apparently my guardian angel and a lawyer who was ready to go to war. Serena thought she'd covered her tracks. She thought she was smart. She thought I'd just accept whatever story she wanted to tell and fade quietly into the background of her new life. She was wrong, and I was about to make sure everyone knew it. I spent the rest of the night organizing the footage, syncing it with the credit card charges and email timestamps, building a timeline that was so airtight you couldn't slip a piece of paper through it. Jamal came over around midnight with more coffee and the kind of moral support that involved mostly just sitting next to me and occasionally saying, "That's so messed up," at appropriate intervals. "You know what the wildest part is?" I said, staring at my spreadsheet of evidence. She could have just been honest. She could have just said, "I'm not happy. I want a divorce. Let's figure this out like adults." But instead, she did all this. The lying, the sneaking around, the trying to steal my money. What? Jamal shrugged. Because people are weird and selfish and bad at confrontation? I don't know, man. I stopped trying to understand why people do terrible things. Now I just make sure they face consequences for it. That's surprisingly wise. I have my moments. My phone buzzed. A text from Priya. "Did you sleep? Please tell me you slept." I replied, "Sleep is for people whose wives aren't trying to commit fraud." Fair point. Want me to bring breakfast tomorrow? You need protein. I smiled despite everything. Despite the anger and the betrayal and the grainy security footage playing on a loop in my head. I had good people. People who showed up. People who cared. And I was going to make sure that meant something. I could have done this the normal way. Could have scheduled a lawyer meeting, shown up in a conference room with Lila, presented my evidence to Serena and her attorney in a professional, mature, incredibly boring setting where everyone speaks in measured tones and pretends to be civil. That would have been the adult thing to do, the reasonable thing to do. The thing that a well-adjusted person who wasn't harboring weeks of rage and betrayal would absolutely do. But here's the thing. I'd spent my entire marriage being reasonable, being understanding, being the guy who didn't make waves, who compromised, who took the high road so consistently that I'd basically built a permanent residence up there. And where had that gotten me? Divorced via email and funding my own humiliation party. So no, I wasn't doing reasonable. I was doing spectacular. The Riverside Community Center, our community center, the one Serena had rented for her freedom celebration, had a monthly booking system that was managed by Mrs. Chun from 4B, who liked me because I'd helped her carry groceries once and hadn't complained when her cat peed in the hallway. I called her on Tuesday morning with a proposition. I wanted to book the center for a family gathering on Friday evening. Yes, I knew it was short notice. Yes, I'd pay extra. Yes, I understood the usual rules about decorations and cleanup. Mrs. Chun, bless her gossipy soul, agreed immediately. I think she smelled drama, and Mrs. Chun lived for drama the way other people live for oxygen. Then I sent out invitations. Not digital ones. Actual physical invitations, printed on nice cardstock that I ordered rush delivery from Staples, because if you're going to stage a confrontation, you might as well have good production values. The invite said, "Family photos and memory night, Friday 7 p.m. Riverside Community Center. Come celebrate our shared memories." It was vague enough to be intriguing and specific enough that people would show up. I invited everyone who mattered. Jamal, obviously, he'd already declared himself my hype man, and was practicing his supportive facial expressions. Lila, who'd be there in her capacity as my attorney and also as someone who enjoyed watching bad people get what they deserved. Priya, who'd insisted on coming and bringing her boyfriend Marcus for backup moral support. Detective Ross from the local precinct, who I'd contacted through Lila and who'd been very interested in the security footage and the potential fraud charges. Mrs. Ortega, because she'd been kind to me and also because she was the building's unofficial news network and whatever happened tonight would be common knowledge by morning anyway. And Serena's family, her parents, who I'd always gotten along with and who I suspected had no idea what their daughter had been up to. Her sister Mia, who'd probably show up hoping for drama and would definitely get it, just not the kind she was expecting. Her Aunt Bee, who I'd always liked and who made incredible coffee cake and had a reputation for calling people out on their nonsense. The key was that I didn't tell anyone what the evening was actually about. Just family photos, memory sharing, celebration of good times. Vague enough to be believable. Getting Serena there was trickier. She'd blocked my number, blocked me on social media, basically eliminated every direct line of communication between us. So I had Jamal text her from his phone. "Hey, it's Jamal. Just wanted to give you a heads up that there's a community thing Friday night at Riverside Center, some kind of building celebration. Your parents are going. Thought you'd want to know. Also, heard there might be press there? Some local news thing about community unity, or whatever. Might be good for your brand." The mention of press and her parents did exactly what I thought it would. She responded within 10 minutes. "I'll be there." "What time?" "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." Friday evening came with all the nervous energy of opening night for a play where I was both the director and the lead actor. I showed up at 5 p.m. to set everything up. The community center had a projector, the same one they used for movie nights and PowerPoint presentations about recycling initiatives, and I'd already loaded my laptop with the evidence. Security footage, time-stamped and organized. Credit card statements, email exchanges, screenshots, everything arranged in a neat, devastating presentation that would have made my old marketing professor proud. Jamal arrived at 6 p.m. with a box of supplies, extension cords, backup USB drives, his laptop as a secondary display option in case mine failed, and, because he was Jamal, a bag of popcorn. For the audience, he explained. Every good show needs snacks. "This isn't a show," I said. "Bro, this is absolutely a show. This is the finale. This is the season-ending episode where all the plot threads come together. This is peak television, except it's your life." He wasn't wrong. People started arriving at 6:45. Mrs. Ortega showed up first with, and I'm not kidding, a casserole, because apparently her response to every significant life event was food. "I brought baked ziti," she announced, "in case people get hungry during the family photos." "There aren't actually going to be family photos," I said quietly. Her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh, Mijo, this is going to be good, isn't it?" Priya arrived with Marcus, who I'd met twice and who seemed like a genuinely nice guy with no idea what he was walking into. Detective Ross came in plain clothes, positioning himself near the back with the casual stance of someone who was definitely not a cop, but absolutely was. Lila showed up in a power suit that could probably be used as evidence in court just based on how intimidating it was. Serena's parents arrived at 7 p.m. sharp because they were punctual people who believed in respecting time commitments. They looked confused but happy to see me, which made me feel slightly guilty about what was about to happen. Her Aunt Bee brought coffee cake, because apparently everyone in Serena's family communicated through baked goods. Mia showed up overdressed and overconfident, already pulling out her phone to document whatever she thought this was going to be. And then, at 7:15 p.m., fashionably late and completely unaware she was walking into an ambush, Serena arrived. She brought her entire entourage, the same friends from the Freedom Party, all dressed like they were going to a gallery opening instead of a community center. They had that energy of people who thought they were the main characters, who expected to be celebrated and photographed and validated. Serena was wearing the designer dress she'd charged to our credit card last month. Her hair was done professionally. She'd brought her own ring light, which was insane but also very on-brand. She saw her parents and smiled, waved to a few people, completely missed Detective Ross in the back, and positioned herself near the front like she was about to give a TED Talk. I stood up. The room got quiet in that way rooms do when someone's about to speak and everyone can sense something's about to happen. Thanks for coming, everyone, I said, keeping my voice steady and friendly. I know I said this was about family photos and celebrating memories, and in a way it is. We're going to look at some images tonight. We're definitely going to remember some things. But first, I want to talk about truth. Serena's smile faltered. Just slightly. Just enough that I knew she was starting to realize this wasn't what she'd expected. See, I spent the last few weeks discovering some things. Things about my marriage, about trust, about what happens when someone decides to rewrite history to make themselves look better. I clicked to the first slide, the email subject line. Don't call or come over. We're done. This is how my wife, ex-wife, ended our marriage. Via email. 3 lines. Very efficient. Very modern. And I replied with something that apparently became quite the social media moment. Got it. Consider it's your last wish. A few people chuckled nervously. Serena's friends looked confused. Jamal was grinning like he'd just won the lottery. But here's what I didn't know at the time. I continued, clicking to the next slide. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was planned. Let me show you. I showed them the emails about the settlement. The power of attorney documentation. The timeline of lawyer consultations that started months before the breakup. Serena's face went from confused to pale to something approaching panic. And then there's the money, I said, pulling up credit card statements. Hotel charges. Expensive dinners. A $600 suit I definitely didn't buy. All charged to our joint account. All for someone who wasn't me. Click. Security footage. Serena and Henri leaving the building. Timestamp visible, matching the hotel charge date. The room was dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard someone breathe. Serena's mother had her hand over her mouth. Her father looked like he was watching a building collapse. Ampy had put down her coffee cake. His name is Henri. I said conversationally, like I was discussing the weather. Nice guy, probably. Terrible at parallel parking. Great at spending my money, though. Really excelled at that. Serena stood up. This is a violation of privacy. You can't just... Actually, Lila said from her seat, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. He can. All of this evidence was obtained legally. The email account was joint. The credit card statements are his records. And the security footage was provided by a concerned citizen. So please, sit down and let him finish. Serena sat down. She didn't have a choice. Her friends looked like they wanted to leave, but were too shocked to move. I showed them everything. Every receipt, every timestamp, every piece of evidence I'd spent weeks collecting. The party she'd thrown with our money. The attempt to access my accounts. The visits to our apartment after we'd separated. All of it, laid out chronically and methodically, a greatest hits compilation of betrayal set to the tune of damning evidence. When I finished, I turned off the projector. The lights came back on. The room was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent bulbs humming. If you wanted a new life, I said, looking directly at Serena, you should have just asked. But you didn't. You lied, you cheated, you stole, and you tried to make me look like the villain while you played the victim. So here's the thing. I'm done being your supporting character. This is my story too. And this is how it actually happened. Detective Ross stood up from the back. Ms. Serena Martinez, I'm Detective Ross. I'd like to ask you some questions about potential fraud and misuse of joint financial resources. You have the right to remain silent. And just like that, the room erupted. Serena's friends scrambled for the exit. Her mother started crying. Mia was filming everything on her phone until Lila politely informed her that recording without consent might be legally problematic. Jamal was eating popcorn and giving me a thumbs up. Mrs. Ortega hugged me and whispered, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. But it was honest. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. If you told me 6 months ago that I'd find spreadsheets and legal documents genuinely thrilling, I would have laughed in your face and suggested you get your head examined. But there I was, the Monday after the community center showdown, sitting in Lila's office with a coffee that cost more than my lunch and feeling absolutely giddy about discovery motions and subpoenas. Turns out, when paperwork is being used to systematically dismantle someone who tried to ruin your life, it becomes wildly entertaining. Lila's office was exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer who charged $400 an hour and had a reputation for making opposing counsel cry. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound legal texts that probably cost more than my car. A desk made of some dark wood that screamed, I win arguments for a living. and a view of downtown that made you feel like you were looking down on all the poor souls who'd made the mistake of crossing her clients. She had my evidence spread across her conference table like she was planning a military campaign, which I guess she kind of was. Financial records on one side, security footage stills on another, email printouts organized by date and level of incriminating content. It was beautiful in a terrifying, hyper-organized kind of way. Okay, Lila said, tapping a pen against her legal pad in that rhythm that meant she was in full lawyer mode. Here's where we are. The good news is that Serena is screwed. The bad news for her is that she's really, really screwed. The better news for you is that we have so much evidence that I could probably argue this case in my sleep and still win. That's the best thing anyone said to me in weeks, I said. Don't get too excited yet. We still have work to do. But yes, the foundation is solid. She pulled out a document that was easily 50 pages long. I've drafted a cease and desist letter that's being delivered to Serena today. It basically says, stop talking about him, stop accessing joint accounts, stop doing literally anything that could be construed as continued harassment or fraud, or we will bury you in legal filings so dense that your grandchildren will still be reading them. Poetic. I thought so. I also filed a motion to freeze all joint assets pending investigation. That means every bank account, every credit card, every shared financial resource is locked down tight until a judge decides who gets what. She can't touch a penny without it being documented and approved. I felt something loosen in my chest, some tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. So she can't just drain everything and disappear? Not unless she wants to add theft to her growing list of legal problems, which, given her decision-making skills so far, isn't entirely off the table, but it would be spectacularly stupid even by her standards. Lila shuffled through more papers, pulling out what looked like official court documents with lots of stamps and signatures. We've also filed for an emergency hearing regarding the fraudulent power of attorney attempt. That email chain where she discussed forging your signature? That's not just unethical. That's potentially criminal. The DA's office is reviewing it, and Detective Ross has been very helpful in moving things along. Detective Ross seemed pretty interested at the community center, I said, remembering how he'd stayed afterward to take statements and collect copies of evidence. He told me he'd seen cases like this before, but never with this much documentation. That's because most people don't have a guardian angel cleaning lady who steals security footage, Lila said with a slight smile. Rosa is genuinely my hero. I sent her flowers, by the way. I hope you don't mind. I felt like someone needed to acknowledge her excellent work. I sent her a fruit basket and a Target gift card, I admitted. Felt like the least I could do for the woman who saved my financial life. Good man. Lila made a note on her legal pad. Now, let's talk about the mortgage situation. Your apartment is jointly owned, correct? Correct. Both our names on the deed, both responsible for payments. And you've been making the payments since the separation? All of them, yeah? She moved out, stopped contributing, but her name's still on everything. Lila nodded like this was exactly what she'd expected. We're filing to have her removed from the deed and the mortgage. Given that she abandoned the property and you've been solely responsible for all financial obligations, plus the evidence of her attempting to defraud you, any reasonable judge will approve it. The apartment becomes yours, she gets nothing, and we can pursue her for back payments she should have been making. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in how the legal system can be both incredibly slow and surprisingly satisfying. There were depositions. Serena's lasted 6 hours, and according to Lila, she'd cried twice and contradicted herself at least a dozen times. There were subpoenas for bank records, phone records, even social media accounts. Turns out, posting about your freedom and new beginning on Instagram while simultaneously trying to steal your ex-husband's money doesn't play well in front of a judge. Serena tried to fight back, of course. She hired her own lawyer, some guy named Brad who wore too much cologne and had the kind of confidence that comes from never having actually been challenged. He sent us strongly worded letters about harassment and emotional distress, and my personal favorite, unwarranted public humiliation. Lila's response was a thing of beauty. She sent back a letter that was essentially a point-by-point destruction of every argument Brad had made, complete with citations, evidence references, and what I can only describe as the legal equivalent of sit down and shut up. She CC'd the judge, the DA's office, and Detective Ross, just to make sure everyone was on the same page. Brad stopped sending us letters after that. The fraud investigation moved forward faster than I'd expected. Detective Ross had apparently taken a personal interest in the case. Maybe because he was tired of seeing people get away with financial manipulation, or maybe because he genuinely thought Serena deserved consequences. Either way, he was thorough. He interviewed Henri, who apparently cracked under the pressure of an actual police detective asking questions, and admitted to everything. The affair, the hotel stays, even accepting the suit and other gifts purchased with my money. Henry's statement is basically a confession on behalf of both of them. Lila told me during one of our weekly update meetings. He didn't realize he was implicating himself in fraud, but he absolutely did. He kept saying things like, Serena said it was her money, and I didn't know it was wrong to accept gifts. The detective said he seemed genuinely confused about why accepting thousands of dollars worth of items purchased with stolen funds might be a problem. So Henry's an idiot and a criminal, I said. Correct, but a cooperative idiot, which helps us. His testimony, combined with the security footage and financial records, makes this about as close to a slam dunk as you can get in court. Jamal had been following the legal proceedings with the enthusiasm of someone watching their favorite TV show. He'd created a group chat called Justice for Stevens that included me, Priya, Marcus, and somehow Mrs. Ortega, who'd learned to use emojis specifically so she could react to updates. Every time Lila sent me good news, I'd forward it to the chat and watch the celebration emojis roll in. Your lawyer is a badass. Jamal texted after Lila got the judge to approve freezing Serena's access to our joint accounts. Like, genuinely scary. I'm adding her to my list of people to never make angry. She's earned every penny I'm paying her, I replied. Which is a lot of pennies, I'm assuming. So many pennies. But worth it. The preliminary hearing happened on a Tuesday in early November. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. You watch too many legal dramas, and you start thinking every court proceeding happens in some grand room with marble columns and dramatic lighting. This was more like a conference room with a judge's bench and uncomfortable chairs that squeaked when you moved. Serena showed up dressed like she was going to a funeral, all black and subdued, with an expression that was probably supposed to convey remorse, but mostly just looked like she'd been caught and was mad about it. Her lawyer Brad tried to argue that this was all a misunderstanding, that Serena had merely been protecting her own interests, and that I was engaging in a campaign of harassment motivated by spite. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, who had a reputation for not tolerating nonsense, looked at Brad like he'd just suggested the sky was green. Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence. The security footage, the financial records, the email communications about fraudulent power of attorney. Are you seriously suggesting that attempting to forge someone's signature to access their bank accounts is protecting her own interests? Brad stammered something about context and misunderstandings. Judge Morrison cut him off. I'm issuing an order for full financial restitution. Ms. Martinez is required to repay all funds inappropriately charged to joint accounts, with interest. The mortgage and property deed will be transferred solely to Mr. Stevens. All joint accounts remain frozen pending final settlement, and I'm referring this case to the DA's office for potential criminal charges related to attempted fraud and identity theft. Do you have anything else to add, Counselor? Brad did not have anything else to add. Walking out of that courtroom felt like emerging from underwater after holding your breath too long. Everything was sharper, clearer. Lila was grinning like she'd just won the Super Bowl. Jamal, who'd taken a personal day to be there for moral support, actually fist-pumped in the hallway. That was beautiful, he said. That judge basically told your ex-wife to pay up or go to jail. That's like the legal equivalent of a mic drop. It's not over yet, Lila warned. But even she couldn't hide her satisfaction. We still have final settlement negotiations and the criminal investigation. But yeah, today was a good day. Priya sent me a text. I'm reading the group chat updates, and I'm screaming. You're getting your money back in the apartment? This is better than any TV show. Mrs. Ortega sent me a gif of someone doing a victory dance. I had no idea where she'd found it or how she'd learned to send gifts, but I appreciated the sentiment. That evening, I sat in my apartment, solely mine now according to a judge's order, and looked at the legal documents Lila had given me. Orders for restitution, frozen accounts, pending criminal charges. It was a stack of papers that represented months of work, weeks of stress, and the systematic destruction of Serena's attempt to rewrite our story. Paperwork had never looked so sexy. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in late November, which felt appropriately theatrical because nothing says your life is being legally dismantled quite like doing it right before the holidays. The courtroom was the same one from the preliminary hearing. Same uncomfortable chairs, same fluorescent lighting that made everyone look vaguely ill, same Judge Morrison presiding with the energy of someone who'd seen every stupid thing humans could do to each other and was perpetually unimpressed. This time, though, the gallery was fuller. Serena's parents were there, sitting on opposite sides of the room like they couldn't decide whose team they were on. Her Aunt B showed up with, I kid you not, a Tupperware container of coffee cake, because apparently even legal reckonings required baked goods. Jamal was there, obviously, dressed in what he called his supportive best friend suit, which was just his regular suit, but he'd worn his lucky socks. Priya and Marcus came too, sitting in the back and giving me encouraging nods like I was about to perform in a school play instead of watch my ex-wife face consequences for fraud. Detective Ross was there in an official capacity this time, wearing his badge and looking like the kind of cop who actually enjoyed paperwork because it meant building airtight cases. Lila sat next to me at the plaintiff's table, her leather portfolio open and approximately 6,000 pages of evidence organized by color-coded tabs that probably had their own filing system. Serena arrived 10 minutes late, which was either a power move or she'd gotten stuck in traffic. She was with Brad, her lawyer, who looked significantly less confident than he had at the preliminary hearing. He had that, I'm getting paid, but I know we're going to lose expression that lawyers get when they realize they've taken a case that's basically defending the Titanic after it hit the iceberg. Judge Morrison didn't waste time with pleasantries. We're here for the final hearing in the matter of Stevens versus Martinez regarding financial fraud, attempted identity theft, and asset division. Ms. Chun, you may present your closing arguments. Lila stood up, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. She had that predator energy, the kind that made you glad she was on your side and deeply sorry for anyone who wasn't. Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about premeditated deception and financial exploitation, Lila began, her voice clear and measured. Ms. Martinez didn't just end her marriage. She attempted to systematically rob my client while gaslighting him into believing he was the problem. Let's review the evidence. She pulled out the first exhibit, the email. Chain about power of attorney. Ms. Martinez consulted with an attorney about accessing my client's accounts without his knowledge. This email, dated 2 months before she filed for separation, discusses how his signature could be handled, a term that, in context, clearly means forged or obtained under false pretenses. Brad tried to object. Your Honor, that's speculation. It's documented in writing. Judge Morrison said flatly. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Chun. Lila pulled out the next exhibits. Credit card statements, highlighted in yellow. Over the course of 6 months, Ms. Martinez charged over $37,000 to joint accounts for expenses that had nothing to do with the marriage or household. Hotel stays with her paramour. Designer clothing. Expensive dinners. Even a $600 suit purchased as a gift for said paramour, with a note that read for S, Happy Anniversary. An anniversary she spent with someone else while telling my client she had a migraine. I heard someone in the gallery gasp. Pretty sure it was Serena's mother. Furthermore, Lila continued, pulling out the security footage stills. We have time-stamped video evidence of Ms. Martinez leaving the marital residence with her affair partner on multiple occasions, dates that correspond exactly with these fraudulent charges. She wasn't just cheating. She was using my client's money to facilitate that cheating, effectively making him an unwitting financial sponsor of his own betrayal. Serena's face had gone from pale to red to something approaching purple. Brad was scribbling notes like they might somehow contain a miracle defense. They didn't. And finally, Lila said, her voice dropping into that quiet register that meant she was about to deliver the killing blow. Ms. Martinez threw herself a freedom party to celebrate leaving her husband, a party that cost over $3,000, charged entirely to joint accounts, held in a community space they both had access to, featuring wine from their wedding that she'd taken without permission. She live-streamed this party to social media, publicly humiliating my client while he unknowingly paid for the privilege. Judge Morrison looked at Serena with an expression that could have curdled milk. Ms. Martinez, do you have anything to say in your defense? Serena stood up, and for a second, I thought she might actually apologize or take responsibility or show some shred of self-awareness. Silly me. Your Honor, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship, she said, her voice trembling in that way that sounded rehearsed. I was trying to find myself, to grow beyond the limitations that were placed on me. Yes, I made mistakes, but they came from a place of pain and survival. This whole proceeding is just another way my ex-husband is trying to control and punish me for daring to choose myself. The audacity, the sheer, unmitigated audacity of this woman to stand in a courtroom, surrounded by evidence of her lies and theft, and claim she was the victim. I felt Jamal's hand on my shoulder from behind, a silent reminder not to say anything stupid. Judge Morrison let Serena finish her speech, and it was a speech, complete with dramatic pauses and hand gestures, before responding in the driest tone I'd ever heard from a human being. Ms. Martinez, I've been a family court judge for 23 years. I've seen actual abuse cases. I've seen people fleeing genuinely dangerous situations. This is not that. This is a woman who wanted to leave her marriage, which is your right. But instead of doing so honestly, you chose to lie, steal, and attempt to commit fraud. Those choices have consequences. She looked down at her notes, then back up at Serena. I'm ordering full financial restitution in the amount of $37,412, plus interest at the statutory rate. You will also pay Mr. Stevens' legal fees, which according to the documentation amount to approximately $18,000. The apartment and all jointly held property will be transferred solely to Mr. Stevens. Additionally, I'm finding sufficient evidence of attempted fraud and identity theft to warrant criminal charges. Detective Ross, please coordinate with the DA's office. Detective Ross nodded, already making notes. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, apparently not done destroying Serena's entire defense. I'm issuing a restraining order prohibiting you from contacting Mr. Stevens directly or through intermediaries, from posting about him on social media, and from accessing or attempting to access any of his financial accounts or property. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? Serena nodded, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time, not the performative kind. The tears of someone who just realized that actions have consequences and judges don't care about your personal brand. And one more thing, Judge Morrison said, and I swear there was the tiniest hint of satisfaction in her voice. Ms. Martinez, I'm ordering you to issue a public statement on the same social media platforms where you defamed Mr. Stevens, correcting the record and acknowledging your financial misconduct. You have 72 hours to comply. The exact wording will be provided by the court to ensure accuracy. Brad looked like he wanted to object, but had finally realized that objecting would only make things worse. Serena was full-on sobbing now, and her friends in the gallery, the same ones who'd been at the Freedom Party, clinking glasses and celebrating, were conspicuously silent. The gavel came down. This court is adjourned. Walking out of that courtroom was surreal. People were patting me on the back, offering congratulations like I'd won something instead of just successfully defended myself against being robbed by my own wife. Lila was already on her phone, probably sending the verdict to her network of lawyer friends who appreciated a good legal victory. Jamal was texting the group chat in real time. Full restitution. Restraining order. Criminal charges. This is better than Christmas. Mrs. Ortega was waiting in the hallway with empanadas in a thermal bag, because of course she was. I heard from Mrs. Chun who heard from her daughter who works in the clerk's office, she said, handing me still warm food. You won everything. I'm so proud of you, Mijo. Thanks, Mrs. Ortega, I said, genuinely touched. And thank you for the empanadas. Food is love, she said, patting my cheek. And also gossip fuel. Everyone in the building will want to hear about this. Serena's parents approached as we were leaving. Her father looked uncomfortable. Her mother looked devastated. We're sorry, her mother said quietly. We had no idea she was doing any of this. We raised her better than this. I didn't know what to say to that. She made her choices was all I could manage. She'll have to live with them now, her father said. For what it's worth, we always liked you. Thought you were good for her. Guess we were wrong about a lot of things. They walked away, and I felt a weird pang of sympathy. They'd just watched their daughter get legally eviscerated for being a terrible person. That couldn't be easy. Aunt B, however, had no such sympathy. She cornered me near the elevator with her Tupperware of coffee cake in a look that could only be described as vindicated. I always thought she was too much, B said. Too dramatic, too self-centered. You seem like a nice boy. Here, take this coffee cake. You deserve it more than she does. Is this a legally binding transfer of coffee cake? Jamal asked. In my family, coffee cake is sacred, B said seriously. More binding than any court order. That evening, my phone exploded, but this time with good messages. Friends I hadn't heard from in months sending congratulations. Colleagues from work who'd heard through the grapevine. Even my mother called, crying happy tears and saying she'd known all along that truth would prevail, even though she'd been just as confused as everyone else. Priya sent me a gif of Beyoncé with the caption, "Justice has been served." Detective Ross emailed me directly. Congratulations on the verdict. The criminal investigation is proceeding. We'll be in touch regarding testimony for the DA's case. You did good work documenting everything. And Lila sent a simple text. Well done. Enjoy your victory. Also, I'm sending you my final bill tomorrow, so maybe don't celebrate too hard. I sat in my apartment, legally and completely mine now, eating Mrs. Ortega's empanadas and Aunt Ba's coffee cake, scrolling through messages and feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes from knowing you fought back, you told the truth, and you won. Serena had tried to rewrite our story, to make herself the hero and me the villain. But the evidence didn't lie. The timestamps didn't lie. The receipts definitely didn't lie. And now everyone knew it. Justice, it turns out, tastes like coffee cake and empanadas. And it's delicious. 6 months later, life looks different in the best possible way. I moved into a condo with actual closet space and windows that don't face a brick wall. Priya became my business partner. We started a design consultancy called Second Act Solutions, which is either brilliant branding or extremely on the nose, but clients love it. We joke about charging freedom fees for rush projects. Jamal's writing a book titled How to Be Dumped Elegantly and Fight Back Spectacularly. I'm expecting royalties since I'm basically the entire case study. Detective Ross sends me holiday cards with those tiny pins taped inside for witness documentation purposes. Rosa still brings me empanadas every Thursday, and I'm convinced she's a guardian angel in sensible shoes. Serena sent a letter 6 months after the verdict, hoping for understanding and closure. I replied with the same energy she'd given me. Got it. Consider that your last wish fulfilled. I don't track her social media anymore. My serotonin comes from landing clients and beating my 5K time. The best revenge isn't elaborate. It's a clean inbox and genuine laughter. I keep the legal receipts in a box, just in case. But mostly, I keep Mrs. Ortega's empanada schedule and Aunt Ba's coffee cake recipe. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine again. Messy, sarcastic, and deliciously real.